We can get started. I'm not sure if Marcia is on the line or not, but
Marcia has joined the meeting, just popped up on my screen.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Now we can get started.
All right, now you can go. Well, someone's got to take the minutes. Steve,
all right, we'll call the meeting to order, 7 o'clock. Yeah. Megan, do we have any correspondence?
No, we don't this time.
Okay. And I'll mess this up again. How are we doing public comment, Bob?
So I think Marcia can indicate if you have had anything uploaded to your e-meeting, but I think we would, if anybody did not load anything up or somebody did not send something in and they wanted to say something in person, they could do that right now. No more than 3 minutes. So if you want to read that, I don't know if anybody wants to say any public comment.
Who's
James Crawford is running the meeting, so people could use the little hand raised again for indicating if they want to do a public comment.
Bob, we did not receive anything to post.
Okay, so right, thank you.
James, do you see anyone that their hand raised?
No, there's no one with a hand raised as of right now.
Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. You have the regular meetings from the April 21st meeting, monthly summary financial reports ending April 30th, the detailed report and the combining financial statements. Does anyone want to extract any of those reports?
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I'll just go. Is anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, then unanimous. All right, reports, PTO update. Is there any?
I believe Joy was going to be on tonight to give a report. Joy Prudhomme?
I don't see. No? Well, we can always go back. If I see her up later, we'll bring her back.
Okay.
So then you're up, Bob.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and I hope everybody had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend with your family. I'm sure it was not as big a celebration as you normally had, but I hope you all enjoyed the 3 days. I just want to start off by saying that I really am very much in awe of the work and the shifts that have gone on over the past 2 months. Every day it amazes me what teachers are doing to teach differently in a different manner. It amazes me what our teacher assistants are doing in different ways to support the teachers they work with and the kids that they work with. Our food service personnel continue to work, but at different places. Our students are resilient and flexible and have been successful. And we certainly have had very supportive parents as parents multitask from home, not only helping their children and supporting them, but also working their own jobs. And I also want to thank, obviously, our administrative team for directing all of this and providing the support necessary. So thank you, students, thank you, families, and thank you, staff, for what has taken place so far this year in our distance learning. I do want to just say a quick, and before I go on to the next item, I don't want to steal any thunder. Has Joy signed on? Because I want to talk about the car wave parade. Has Joy come onto the meeting? Joy Prudhomme? I guess not.
Attendees.
Steve, I can't hear you. You may be muted. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see her on the list of attendees.
Okay. So let me just say, there was an amazing wave parade, a car wave parade that took place on Friday here at the school from 9 to 10 o'clock. An abundance of teachers, staff, and administration were spaced along the south driveway, socially distanced, of course, to wave to students and families as they drove by in their cars. Similar to our bus ride in April, this was a great opportunity for students to come on campus or to at least get the sense of campus. In conjunction with this, the PTO also did a real wonderful thing in encouraging parents to take part in this and to create signs to really celebrate teacher and staff appreciation time. They couldn't celebrate it in the way they normally like to do that, but they were able to do that with signs, balloons, streamers, and all of that. And it was all off. The line of cars was led by First Selectman Beth Heller, and it was led by police cars and a full complement of the town fire trucks. And amazingly enough, over 300 cars participated in this. So I want to thank everybody who was part of this, and thank you to PTO for orchestrating a great deal of that. Beecher administration continues to work. Yes.
Sorry, if you're not speaking, can you mute yourself? Because there seems to be a lot of stuff in the background. Go ahead, Bob, sorry.
Okay. So just in regards to our update of COVID-19 and planning for the fall, the Beecher administration continues to work with our staff on completing the year strong with the distance learning program. We have started the logistics of material returns and room closing and process of getting things back to students. Information will be coming out soon. And we're going to start to turn our attention to the fall and planning for the fall. Everyone is certainly in agreement that reopening schools in September will be far more difficult than closing them back in March. Schools need to be reopened with caution, as it's likely we're going to see a second wave of the coronavirus hit us. As I mentioned before to board members and in updates, to assist in the reopening process, the Connecticut State Department of Education has established regional reopening school advisory committees. And those committees will be there on a regional basis to provide resources to districts, to superintendents, and to committees at each local level. And more guidance will be coming from the State Department regarding fall reopening. Steve, I'm going to ask you, I think Joy just came on. Do you want me to continue, or do you want, because mine is going to be fairly lengthy. Do we want to have Joy maybe get on for a moment? And
Sure.
Okay. Joy Prudhomme, you're on with PTO update. Joy, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Sorry about that. I'm having technical difficulties. So I didn't hear anything that anyone said. Am I supposed to speak now?
Yes, you can. It's your turn to do a PTO update.
Okay. Let's see here. I just want to back up for a moment. We, obviously the year has been very different than where we started. I believe you were updated in February before this all happened. Sadly, due to COVID-19, we were forced to cancel the following. The Spring Book Fair, which would have happened in March 30th through April 2nd. We had a whole school program, Earth Balloon, April 1st through 3rd, that was canceled. Special guests, including Julianne Collier with her Birds of Prey for the 3rd grade classes, April 6th and 7th. The Book Swap Week was the week of April 27th. Arts Week 13, May 11th through the 15th, actually was done virtually, which is amazing. May 15th would have been our BRS BCS Family and Friends Night at Quasi, which is hugely successful, and sadly that could not happen this year. And finally, 6th grade graduation festivities. I will say though that and I think I caught a little bit of Bob saying about how we partnered with the BRS administration this past Friday and surprised over 60 teachers and staff with an amazing car and wave parade, which was led by our Officer Lynch, First Selectman woman Beth Heller, Police Chief Capiello, and also included 9 fire trucks and I don't even know, at least 300 cars filled with BRS students and their families. We're able to say thank you to our teachers and staff and how much we miss everybody. And we were able to say goodbye for the school year. I'm still overwhelmed by the love the community has for our school and the teachers and staff. It was truly special. And hopefully it filled everyone's heart with the hope of being together again soon. I will also say that one other thing that we've been able to do during this time where we're very, very limited of being able to do business as we're used to, is the PTO is giving back to our community during this unprecedented time. We're helping contribute funds to the Woodbridge Food and Fuel to alleviate the food insecurity sold from May 4th through the end of the year, and it was proven very beneficial. It helps the Woodbridge community via the WFNF. It also helps spread our BRS spirit, and it teaches our children that this is what we do in a time of need. We help our neighbors, and we really are in this together. And it's gotten our BRS community excited to take part in being in service and actually being able to do something during this time for our community. As far as the PTO planning for next year, obviously, like everything else, we're kind of on hold and in limbo. But we're going to just go ahead and continue to plan things. And if we have to tweak them, find new ways to do them virtually, we're just going to get really creative. But we definitely think that, you know, we need to keep our community together as much as we can, especially because we are literally distanced and apart right now. So I just want to thank you all, and that's all I have for the PTO.
Thank you. Any
Thanks,
questions
Joy.
for the PTO? Thank you for everything you guys do to support the school. It means a lot to us. Thank you.
And I'll just continue on.
Yep, go ahead, Bob.
And I'll just say to the PTO, Joy, to the PTO co-presidents, Lauren and Andrea, words can't express the feeling on Friday. So thank you again for all you did. It was just an amazing time. If you were there, you would have had the chills running up and down your spines. And if see the pictures, if you get them, videos, they're out there, and enjoy the great vibes that took place. I just spoke a little bit about the Connecticut State Department establishing regional reopening school advisory committees to serve as resources for districts and superintendents. So that will be an assistance to us. Also, local districts are asked to establish a school reopening committee of their own. We already actually have a team that has really been working together. It's our administrative team, our nurse supervisor, and our facilities manager, and we're going to be expanding that team to include stakeholders and other groups. WEA, the CSEA, CILU are 3 union groups. We'll have some parent representatives. I'm going to ask the board chair to be part of that, and we want to get a town representative as well. I'll be asking each of the union heads to give me some representatives for these for this committee in the coming days, and we will be developing reopening plans for Beecher. And I anticipate bringing some additional information to you about this committee and their work in June when we have our June board meeting. Last week, I attended a meeting with fellow superintendents across the state regarding assessment and accountability. This is a very, very difficult area that we're all dealing with. The common conversation that took place in this was really reflective in nature, reflecting on the fact that all of our state assessments were canceled or waived this year, and there's a possibility that they might be waived next year as well, depending upon some of the discussions going on. Benchmark assessments have not been given in the spring, and given the fact that students are at home learning, there's no reliable way to do the assessment process. And this was shared across all the superintendents in this meeting, and just the fact it's just is what it is. The mutual goal of superintendents obviously are to bring students back to the buildings if it's safe, to bring students back with very positive support for the social emotional needs, and balance that with instruction, and make it all happen in a balanced manner. We definitely expect to use a good chunk of our summer curriculum planning time to address areas such as assessment, adjusting curriculum, all to meet the needs of our students in the structure that they will be returning in. And that structure, as we get a little further down the road, maybe distance learning or on-site or a combination. So this is an area that we're really just starting to break open, but it's an area that's important, and it's an area that it's going to be a struggle. There's no doubt about that, and that's a common theme across the state for my colleagues. So we'll more on that as we move forward. Surveys. A little later, we'll be talking about the surveys that we would like to put out this week, and we really need to put them out. These surveys will assist us in gathering just some basic information about distance learning experiences, social emotional needs, and we hope to actually follow up on these surveys with a couple of focus groups that I think will help to bring this information to light for us as we use it to plan moving forward. Our goal is to launch those surveys by the end of this week or by Monday. Just in terms of our facility work, there's been a myriad of projects completed by our custodial maintenance team over the last 2 months, really taking advantage of time and the opportunity. And so there'll be a PowerPoint that is being constructed and presented at the June 5th facility meeting. We'll make sure that all board members get a chance to see that and put it out there for our greater community, because it really is a testament to the work that's been done during this time. Just from a budget update standpoint, I think we all know that the town budget's been adopted. It's been adopted with a 1% reduction in taxes and a 0 increase for the Woodbridge Board of Education. Administration is going to continue to work on end of the year spending in terms of determining what our surplus will look like as we get to the very end of June. And we're looking at the fact that COVID-19 has had a positive impact on our surplus, but there's also unanticipated COVID-19 expenses going into the new year. The good thing about Woodbridge and the positive thing that I've always experienced is that there's a very collaborative relationship between town and school district. We've met with Town Hall, and we want to, at some point in early June, go back and have another meeting to determine the allocation of the surplus that we will have at that point, and how that's allocated to the school to help us with unanticipated expenses for next year and prepaying some, as well as the allocation that goes back to the town who supports us so well. So we expect to bring all of this information on our final budgeting and how this is all going to land to our June 15th board meeting. Just on a couple of other quick notes, I just want to say that I had an opportunity to share in the joy of the DARE ceremony for all of the 6th grades. All 6 classes held their graduation 2 classes at a time, and thank you for the 6th grade team and teachers, as well as Officer Lynch for orchestrating that and making that a very, very positive experience for our students as we develop them and really mold them into role models. I know that Mrs. Sherman and Mrs. Merrill and Mrs. Mammon are going to give some updates in a little bit. They'll talk a little bit more about some of the 6th grade activities as well. But there are some things we're trying to plan and maximizing what we can do in this very unusual time we're in. Kindergarten registration. So on a very healthy note, we have a very healthy enrollment so far. 105 students registered, assigned to kindergarten for September. So right now that's about 17.5 students per class. We have 6 sections budgeted. Our guideline for kindergarten is 17 to 19. So we hope that all the kids who move into the Beecher Road School don't move into kindergarten between now and September. hope they move into other grade levels. We're looking forward to putting together the annual publication of the bridge. We are starting to assemble information for that, and it will be a special edition because it really will focus on the very unusual way we've had to deliver instruction and meet the needs of students during this pandemic. So that will assume to be coming out to households across the town sometime in July. And finally, I just want to mention that I'm looking very much forward to the June meeting where we're able to recognize our CAPS 6th grade award winners, as well as the 2 SCASA award winners from 6th grade that had their ceremony delayed or canceled actually back from April. So we'll look forward to celebrating some of our 6th grade students at our June 15th regular meeting. And that will happen a little earlier than usual. It'll happen at 6:30 that night. That completes my report, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into each of these other items here. And then after those items are over, the administrative team will give a BRS update about distance learning and other related things. Is that okay with the board chair? Okay. So from the first item is the ad hoc committee for security personnel. And so just you've been, I think, been updated on the fact that this is an area that we looked at 3 years ago. The SRO ad hoc committee at that time was called that. Now we're calling it security. But it's my recommendation to reestablish this personnel security committee and to take a look at the needs that we have and the costs that will be associated for the 21-22 school year, not for the school year coming up, but this will be in preparation for the following school year. So in your packet, there is certainly a one-page, actually it's more than one-page summary of the membership of that committee and the charge for that committee. We actually want to be a working committee that's going to be moving towards bringing to the full board a report in September. So I think it's self-explanatory. I would welcome any questions you might have or any wonderings.
Bob, it's Joyce. Yes, it's Joyce. I am glad to see that we are beginning the ad hoc committee for the SRO discussion. On a tangential matter, I was just wondering whether policy is meeting, because at the policy meeting before COVID, the very last one, we weren't able to finish the discussion about assignments to ad hoc committees. And because we're doing more and more of these committees, which is great because it shows a lot of engagement and trying to address various issues, I just would want to make sure that we finish that discussion because we were trying to outline the process and then memorialize it because there seemed to be some confusion.
Right. So for the time being, just because the clock is ticking, what I was going to do with this this committee and the one I described earlier, the reopening one, is to just ask each of the union heads to just select somebody and let me know who that person is. I'd like to have a conversation at least so they'll know what's expected of the committee. But we haven't. You're right. We haven't had a chance to finish that policy, and I thought, just in due respect to the union, allow them to select their person. I think that would probably be appreciated by them, and it also would allow them to find someone who has the time available to give to this endeavor. So I don't know if that would make it easier just to move it forward, because otherwise we're going to have a policy committee before we even get started with the SRO, and I'd like to try to move this along if possible.
Well, we do have a current policy on how we select these things. I know we're going to change it, but policy revisions take 30 days minimum from the time of a meeting. So I think we keep moving forward and we'll address that at the next policy meeting. But I don't think we should stop doing the things that we need to get done. And I don't want to get to a point where we're late in the year next year and we still haven't discussed this SRO. And then
I agree. I agree. The SRO definitely has to be discussed, but I would just say let's not lose sight of making sure that we continue to review policy, because some of the policies are actually quite important. and process determines the outcome.
Can I just, yeah, agreed. Can I just say that I think the way that particular conversation was going, in what I'm describing, allowing the union to pick their person, that should be, I think, fairly well received news. Would you say, Joyce, or not?
Yes, I think there's still some more work to do about exactly how that happens. Who do they have final say, etc. But if you're saying they have final say and they just report it to whoever it is, whether it's you or whether it's the chair, that's fine, because I agree that in the interest of time, we need to move ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking for them just to report and let me know who it's going to be. And but the only thing I want to do is let them know what the commitment's going to be, so the person's not going to be surprised when they all of a sudden join. Yeah.
All right, does someone want to move?
I just have one question. If we're interested, we just tell you, Steve, if we're interested in participating in that committee.
What's that?
I said, if we're interested in participating in that committee ourselves, we just tell you and you'll go on.
I can make the motion. I move that we establish an ad hoc security committee chaired by Superintendent Gilbert to review the SRO process with membership as presented. And the charge of the committee is that they make recommendations to the Woodbridge Board of Education on security personnel needs and costs for the 2021-2022 school budget at the September 21st, 2020 meeting.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Discussion?
Could you tell me who the second was, please?
Dan. Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes. Thank you.
Just on a side note, I do want to just say that my error, we actually haven't fully designated Sandy Stein as the Board of Selectmen member. That name got on there, and I should have held on that. She may very well be the person, but she hasn't been formally asked yet. So, sorry, mea culpa, Sandy. I sent her an email today.
Okay.
The other thing about parents at large, we'll be sending something in the newsletter, the next available newsletter, and ask parents who are interested to let us know. And then we will, if there's more than 2 parents, we will basically just, do a random selection like we've done in the past to have them on. And we'll ask the PTO for a representative as well. That'll be an additional parent.
Okay.
The next item is
Yep.
The next item is the distance learning surveys. As I mentioned earlier, we want feedback. We want to have a fairly easy survey for people to fill out, crisp and to the point. That's what we've tried to do here. They're not lengthy, and we also want to look at the idea that we may possibly have some focus groups to follow up after we get these results back, so we can actually have some conversations with people on a WebEx. But we definitely want feedback. Our goal is to really get the survey out. My goal is to really this Friday and give about a 1 week or 10-day turnaround. And we most likely could probably bring some basic response or some basic results, hopefully back by the June 15th meeting, or at least give a taste of that. I don't know if there's any comments people have. People might have some observations here. We tried to put this together using a number of different models from different districts to even local districts in our BOA region. Again, all with the idea of trying to make it user-friendly. So I'm all ears.
Questions for Bob?
Bob, thank you so much for pulling this together very quickly. It's very much appreciated, and I think it will be very valuable as it informs our decisions. I had a couple of questions and observations. For the parent survey, as I was taking a look at it, I have 2 children one in first grade, one in fifth grade. And as I'm answering the questions, I'm pretending to answer the questions, I was just thinking that I would answer them very differently depending on the grade of the student. I don't know if anyone else had the same thoughts. And so I think parents who have multiple kids might feel very divided about how to answer the questions.
Good point. And I think, I'm sure there's many people who probably share that, like you said, that feeling. I know James Crawford is listening in the background, so I may go to him for a moment, but what I can say here is that, and James can correct me if I'm wrong, but when this survey comes out in the manner it's going to come out, it's going to be a little different than Panorama. So you could fill one out with each of your kids in mind. So you could fill it out twice, thinking of, student at grade X and the other student in grade Y. James, can you chime in and tell me if I am right or wrong on that? If I'm wrong, I apologize.
So I will say that this is past practice that we do send one survey out, and it has you think of one of your children in this case. So in past, with all the Panorama surveys, you're only able to fill it out once. So Bob, I would defer to you if you would like them to fill it out twice, but in the past for Panorama, it's been parents have gotten one chance to fill out a survey result.
Correct. In all honesty, and we have not, we're doing what most districts are doing, which is not going through, there's a lot more contortions with Panorama. So we're doing this, sending it out as a link through Swift K-12. I would advocate for a parent who asked that question to fill it out twice. I would just say that would be helpful. This is going to be a dipstick kind of a feel. Hopefully we'll never have to give a survey like this again. But certainly, I think it's more helpful for us to kind of lead towards getting a pulse and getting into a focus group kind of a scenario. So I think the important thing for us to do is to also make it very clear what families can do to answer that question. So when we send it out in the instructions, to make sure that we've been clear about what we're saying you can do with this and how to go about doing that.
That sounds good, Bob. I was also curious as to whether anyone else might be interested in asking the question about how effective live streamed meetings are. Again, having kids in different age groups, again, I've had very different experiences. And so I was just wondering whether other board members would be interested in asking that question about live streamed meetings. And also, I guess, for the teachers as well.
Wait, do you mean like live stream classroom stuff? What do you mean live stream?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, live streamed meetings started happening. And so for the older kids, it was a little messy at first, but I think they got better at doing it. But for the younger kids, it was just all over the place. So now they're trying smaller group meetings. And again, there's no instruction. It's more, I think, making sure that kids feel connected to each other and to the classroom and to the teacher. So I see the value in that, but it's really hard. Like, there were only 4 kids on the last call for my daughter, and it was like they don't talk at the right time. They don't, the parents have to be there to make sure that they're muted. It's just very chaotic, and I don't know how much value other people feel live stream meetings have. And again, it probably makes a difference what age group we're talking about.
Right.
Just a quick side note, and then let me just say on a quick side note, we try to leave some of the open-ended questions here for people who, and we actually thought a little bit about that too, the recorded lessons versus the live, and thought that if something really had an impression on somebody, that they would hopefully share that in a sort of an open-ended manner. At least that was our thinking when we put this out, but I'm certainly listening to the conversation. So I think I just cut somebody off. Go ahead.
This is Dan Cowan, and I have to agree with Bob that I think that those open-ended questions do address your issue, Joyce. And I think that, everyone can answer, take that opportunity to put the things that they think they can do. It says right there, how can we improve it? What are we doing right? So you could list it right out there as a couple of bullet points, And I don't think there's a character count. I don't see if there's a character count there, but I think that's the opportunity to do it. And I also don't think, like, you want people to participate, so you want it to be concise.
Okay, the other question I wanted to put out there, and this would be for the teacher survey, is whether teachers have the tools and the training necessary to carry out distance learning effectively. It's a very different kind of world. It's a different approach. And there are a lot of different aspects that I think teachers probably could use some training on, but that's just from an outsider view. And I would be interested to hear what others think about that.
You know, like, what can we get for them? Are you done, Joyce? If you're done, I'm gonna pick up.
Oh,
I like that last question that you proposed, Joyce. I do think similar to what we said in the previous survey, it could be picked up in the open-ended, but it does seem like kind of an important question to ask, so maybe it'd be good to ask of everyone.
I agree. I think it's a good question to ask as a question where there's a limited number of responses to provide. I think the open-ended questions are useful because it allows some of the respondents to expand on answers that they gave or to address things that weren't asked of them. But I think the advantage of the response categories is that we get a quick and easy way of summarizing important issues that we want to make sure we get answers to. And to me, that's one that I definitely would want to see responses to, is teachers' reactions to whether they have what they need to actually, the training that they need, the resources they need to conduct distance learning.
can I just add a few more ideas for questions? I think that as leaders, we should be held accountable as well for the teacher survey. And I think it might be interesting to put in there, I know, how effective is the Board of Education reading through, this time of crisis. I saw the question about the administration, so I think that that's good. And maybe there should be a question about, whether you feel supported by the superintendent. So it'd be the BOE, the superintendent, and the administration. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
It's fine. I like bad news. People can complain about me.
If those questions are going to be added, I would just want to make sure I'm capturing, and I'm not sure if anybody else has anything else to say, but if the group wants to move forward on that, I would want to just know, is this just the same wording? What can the superintendent do differently to support you? And it's an open-ended answer. What can the Board of Education do differently to support you? It's an open-ended answer. Is that what we're talking about?
Why don't you just do the 1 through 5 score for each one, because that's how you did the administrative team. So it's,
No, I see the administrative team for the teacher one. If that's what we're talking about, it's an open-ended, right?
On the first page, the last question says, "Have you felt supported by the?"
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the next part of that. Okay, gotcha.
So it would be the parallel questions for the Board of Ed as well as the superintendent.
Well, I think then you have the fourth question be, what can any of the above do to support you better? That way you're getting numerical answers and only one open-ended answer, and they can answer about the Board of Ed. They could answer about the administration. or they can answer about the superintendent. But we're only asking them to do numerical, we're only adding numerical questions.
Okay.
That's good, Bryce.
All right, so I just have kind of the same point for all three. And I was wondering if we can add some kind of note above the open-ended questions that say, can you please not include names or sensitive circumstances in this survey? Please contact the teacher, the principal, and then the superintendent first with specific concerns. If the issue goes unresolved, then feel free to contact the Board of Ed. But, that way people know that if they pepper this thing, it's not useful to anybody to slander somebody in a survey. It just doesn't do any good. There's a chain of command for handling that kind of stuff. And that goes on the parent and the teacher survey. So however we want to word that. And then I think that on the student survey, page 2, I think we should ask a question of the vein of how capable are your parents in helping you? There's a question about how capable, let's see, how supported you felt from your teachers. So it's kind of in that vein. Maybe it's how supportive do you feel from your parents in doing your work? Because I think it's important. If the kids feel like they're totally abandoned by their parents, it tells us where we need to target our efforts. If they say like, I don't know. Personally, I'd like to know that.
One thing I'd like to do is, depending on, is anybody else who has any comments about this, I want to go back to each one of these and make sure we've captured the essence of what the group is asking us to tweak here. So once we get through all of it, any comments, let's go back to starting with teacher and make sure we have it right.
Okay.
I'm complete.
Anyone else have any comments?
A few minor things here in terms of the formatting of the survey. I think so. Where's the item here? So it's the first one for the teacher survey, and I think it's for the parent survey as well. There are some overlapping categories there. So, for example, the 5 to 7 and the 7 to 10. So those should be mutually exclusive. So if someone has about 7 hours, they don't know which one to select. I would also change the direction of the response categories, going from negative to positive. That's typically how they're represented, and the numbers typically usually it's convention to go from smaller numbers being negative and higher numbers being positive. So or more of the thing that you're trying to measure, rather, is a better way of putting it. So I would reverse the direction of some of those.
Right. It doesn't look like it's consistent. It looks like some questions, the negative is to the left and the positive is to the right. And a couple of the questions, it's the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
So that first one, we 1 through 5, we want to reverse that one, right, Mike? But the other two that I see are probably correctly done. Struggling to rocking, and great to great. Yes. Not so great to great.
Yeah.
And you're also so it should be less than 5, 6 to 7, or 8 to 10, and 11 to 15, right?
Yes.
11 to 15, 7 to 10, 6 to 7, less than 5. 5 or less.
Less than 5.
Well, if you do less than 5, then you can make the one above it 5 to whatever, 5 to 7 or 5 to 6.
Okay. 11 to 15, 7 to 10, 5 to 7, less than 5. How's that?
No.
Is that
11 to 15, 7 to 10, 5 to 6.
5 to 6, sorry.
And less than 5.
Yeah.
Or maybe whatever you want to, I don't know. It should probably be similar, but you don't want the numbers overlapping.
We'll look at that, and we'll kind of reflect back on what we've heard from people, maybe, and try to.
Okay.
I get the point, though. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
In looking at the questions for the teachers, there was one that made me think a little bit, and that was the question about hours that teachers are working. And I don't necessarily think that the question should be changed, but it just made me think if we could find a way to help those who are working really long hours. So in essence, matching capacity with need. And so presumably this survey is anonymous, but if there's a way of asking teachers separately, are there teachers out there who are working more than X number of hours, but not asking, how many hours you're working, because you don't want to make teachers feel anxious, right? This is a very anxious time. You don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. But if we could figure out which of those teachers are working really long hours, and then asking whether there are any volunteers out there who would want to help out. You could even gamify it and make it fun, some token awards or whatever, just to help some of these teachers because of the situation that they're in or the subject matter that they're teaching. They could use a hand. But I guess we would want to match, capacity with need in a way that was not, that didn't make people feel uncomfortable, and on the contrary, would be fun, would build community, etc. My impression is that there are certain teachers that are working very, very hard, very long hours.
I hear the idea and I understand it, and I it's sort of like capitalizing on your capacity, and it also becomes, this is not a negative or a positive, it becomes also a union kind of a thing, because my job does this and your job does that, and so sometimes that can be, even if we weren't in a distance learning COVID-19 kind of a time, some people's jobs are very, very heightened at certain times, and others, there's different heights, and it kind of rises and falls a little bit, I guess. But I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm not sure how we address that, to tell you the truth.
I guess if we just asked for people, if they wanted to volunteer the number of hours that they're working, if they're working really long hours, right? And then also asking people if they want to volunteer to help out with such and such things, responsibilities. I have no idea what kinds of things that these teachers who are working long hours might need, but there might be a list, and going out to say to people, look, if you happen to want to help out, here are some things that such and such person needs to get done. Would you be willing to do it? And that way it's not requiring anyone to do it. It's just all on a volunteer basis. So we could see whether that would help the community.
So I'm not seeing this as a question or altering the survey. I'm seeing it as a practice of what could come out of the survey. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone have other survey questions before Bob runs through what we're going to add? Okay.
So for the teacher survey, we're going to refine our numbers for the hours that in a day that are being spent. We'll get that right. We are going to make sure that we go from negative left to positive right when we have numbered kinds of responses most of the time, and rarely should be reversed on that one. I'm also hearing that for the teacher one, you want 3 separate questions. Have you felt supported by the administrative team, 1 through 5? Have you felt supported by the superintendent, 1 through 5? Have you felt supported by the Board of Ed, 1 through 5? And have one open-ended question after that. It says, what can any of these individuals do differently to support you? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And then I'm also hearing that it was raised to possibly have a question added that would have something to do with, do you need, I kind of characterize it as, do you need additional professional development or support in doing this work? I'm not sure how, Joyce, I think you brought that. I don't know how to actually title that or how to word that. So
how about what kind of tools and or training might help you teach more effectively through distance learning or something like that.
So we'll play around. Can we play around with that a little bit at the administrative level, and then we'll put that in there?
Absolutely.
The parent one, I know we're going to clarify about, how many times a family can fill that out. I think we also want to Mike's point, we want to make sure that the number of hours a day your child participates doesn't have, so we'll change the numbers there a little bit if we need to, maybe more than 5, 3 to 5, 1 to 2, I don't know, something like that. We'll want to do again, put the non-effective to very effective. We'll switch those around. I am blanking if there was anything else that one had.
A note on the page 2 before the open-ended question starts saying, please keep names and sensitive circumstances out of your answer.
That goes for teacher and
Parent. Like, follow the chain of command with complaints, however best worded.
And then with the student one, I don't know if I'm not sure I heard anything for the student one.
Well, there's a question about, do you feel supported by your parents? But
That's right.
Your parents.
I do like the question. I just don't know if the parents are going to like seeing it.
Hey, parents may not see the answers. We're going to see
Right.
the answers, and the kids are anonymous. I mean, is there a better way to get at that? Because maybe the kids need some way to communicate that they're not getting what they need on that side, right?
Maybe it's a question of, are your parents able to help you do what you're being asked to do? Because I've heard some kids say to me, my mother and father don't get it. So
That new math.
how then can we help that child get the support that they need if the parent isn't capable of giving that support?
Could we broaden it out a little bit beyond the parent and say, how well is the home structure supporting your ability to engage with learning? Because it may be more than just the parents. It could be how many internet devices you have and siblings in the house. So, I mean, it could be like many things at home that are making it hard to engage.
So there is a question that says, what challenges do you face when working at home? Is that?
Well, then they might say that one of the challenges is their parents, Dan.
Right.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine that like we can have an open question, like, 'cause it is not just the parent, right? It's like, do you have a dedicated desk, or are you at the kitchen table? Do you have 12 noisy brothers and sisters that are making?
So do you think the question that's in there now is not good enough? I guess that's my question. What challenges do you face when working at home? Is that not getting at what you're trying to get at?
Lisa's trying to chime in.
Who?
Principal Sherman.
Oh, go ahead. You can always jump in.
Am I allowed to talk?
Of course.
So I feel a little bit nervous about a question like that for a few reasons. And I'm thinking out loud right now, so just bear with me. First of all, I would hesitate to even use the word parents because of all of the different family structures we have in our school. Secondly, I feel as if because there are so many nuances to that question, like you just named off a bunch, like, do you have a dedicated desk? So if we don't get into sort of the weeds of why is it that it is a challenge for you, then I don't know that the question itself will give us a ton of information. Like we can find out, oh, the parents can't really help me, but we don't know the why behind it. So we don't know how to address it or support them without getting to the why behind that. And thirdly, I feel like, I mean, this is all happening, and I know that we all know this, but it's all happening during a global pandemic. And we do have parents who are healthcare workers and they have to go to work. So they aren't home, and that's not a fault of theirs. You know, it's not, so the kid maybe isn't supported by the parents because the parents have to work. They're essential workers. And so the kid's trying to figure it out on their own. And that's not a thing that we can do anything about necessarily on our end, other than to continue to try to support them, their emotional well-being, just as much as their academic one. So I guess I would want to wrestle with the wording of that question a little before we put that in the survey and see if we can either make it more specific or if we can, I don't know. I guess I would want to wrestle with that a little bit. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you about that, right? That there's sometimes there's nothing a parent can do, but the question becomes, is it a large problem of essential workers that can't help them, let's say, or is it a very small, like, is it a 1% problem of our population with kids who don't have parents who can support them? Or is it like a pandemic inside the population of kids that have nobody there to support them? That's more the information that I was looking to get to. Like you said, there's nothing we can do about an individual one response that says, like, I can't get support from my parents because we don't even know who it is. But if in general we know that there's 50% of kids that feel unsupported, then it's a totally different thing. That's the information I was trying to get to.
So I would go back to the original question that's in there, which is what challenges do you face when working at home? Because I think what we're trying to figure out on the survey side is, you know, what is happening? What are the challenges? We're not trying to rate it. We're not laying blame. We're just trying to say, if we need to continue with distance learning, and let's say something happens in the fall and we go back to distance learning, are there any things that we can do that might help some of those things? And I would hate for anyone to think that we're trying to say it's a bad thing that your parents aren't helping you enough. I don't think that's it. I think the reality is we do know that some people are going to work every day. Some people aren't. Some people are home and able to help. Some people aren't. We get all that. And I think the idea from the survey is, how prevalent are the problems working from home, and how universal are they? So I almost would say just let's leave it there and let the kids write what they write, and we probably will get some good information from it.
That's fine. I can let it go. The only reason I even asked the question was because the question above it that said, you know, how supported did you feel from your teachers? And that immediately made me think, well, there's two parts to education, right? It's what the teachers do, and then it's how the parents support the teachers as well. So that's the only reason why I bring it up at all.
All right. Okay, so I'm hearing student survey will leave as is. There's something at the top, maybe you said this already, it says, not on the student survey, on the parent survey, it says something like pre-K 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's option 6. Is that some grade I don't know about at school? Or is that
that was a test to see if you were reading it closely. That will be changed.
I didn't know if maybe we had some, you know, super secret program that no one knows about. All right.
I comment on the question about the student survey. Is there a reason why the questions about supported and manageable are open-ended questions rather than closed-ended ones? I just think it is just going to make it more challenging to process the data once it's in. If they're going to be writing in different responses, it would be a lot easier to summarize it if you had, say, you know, supported going from not supported at all to very supported, and the same with manageable.
Not supported, slightly supported, somewhat supported.
Well, you don't have to do each individual one. I think we did with the other ones. We just say not supported at all to fully supported.
1 through 5, and then.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you could do each one. You know, not at all supported, a little supported, somewhat supported, very supported. And then the same thing for manageable, very unmanageable, little,
or it could be like not at all, slightly, somewhat, quite, or
right.
extremely.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think for some kids that may make it easier for them, and it might make it more manageable. Excuse the pun, but I think it might. But I also want to just, from my administrative team, is there anything that they would like to just add in? Because, you know, we worked on this together, and, you know, sometimes you start looking cross-eyed at yourself when you do this for too long. But Lisa, Doreen, Cheryl, is there anything you want to add in about that student one in terms of it was open-ended versus giving a choice just for a rating?
I think it simplifies things. We were just trying to gain as much information as the other surveys. Sometimes we were left having questions from some of the questions. So we were trying to allow ourselves to just hear what they had to say. But I think it's fine with giving specific responses. Might simplify it for the kids. I agree.
Why not just leave one open-ended at the very end? Is there anything you want to tell us?
Yeah. I was going to say, I do like the idea of having at least one open-ended question, because it does often elicit some interesting answers with some deeper information. So I think I agree, simplifying it is good, but I definitely would want to keep at least one open-ended question that students can respond to.
I agree.
I agree.
So are we saying to add an open-ended, after what challenges do you face, adding one, is there anything else you want to tell us as open-ended? Is that what we're saying? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that works.
Okay.
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 So that's all three, right?
That's all three.
So you'll fix those up and we'll get them out the end of the week, or hopefully the end of the week.
That's our goal.
Okay.
Thank you very much, folks. I'm on a roll here, so I'm going to go to the next one, if that's okay, Chair.
Yep.
The next one
sorry.
is-
Bob, David Ross had a question before. I did not see him raising his hand.
Gotcha.
Bob, you mentioned at the top, you were talking about distance learning, that the state had either canceled or waived all standardized testing. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about that. What does that mean? Are we allowed to do it if we want? What would be the financial implications? Do we pay for the test each year when we do them? Can we do them if we so desire? We've talked about this, but I realize that the tests are often used in a summative way to assess the performance of the school. But particularly with the distance learning and all the uncertainty around it, I don't understand how we can really think about our curriculum and what's working and what are areas for improvement without formative data. And it seems to me that even if we acknowledge all the limitations in validity, if we're running tests in the home, at least they could offer us some form of data on how kids are doing.
Thanks, Dave. I would echo that sentiment, because if we're talking about developing curriculum over the summer to meet students' needs, we need to understand what those needs are. And so even if we are able to run the assessments, not for state purposes or any formative purposes, but just so that we understand where we are, how much learning loss is there, and how are we going to address those needs, I think there's value in that.
So
both for absolute scores and the standard deviation. So we're curious if they've gotten where they want, but how much has the group diverged?
Right. So going a little deeper in the conversation that I was in last week. So the Smarter Balance Assessment, which our 3rd through 6th graders take as the summative assessment for the state, which happens around May. There's a window of time. It was A, waived, and B, I do not believe there's an ability to participate in all, but that particular assessment would not be an assessment one could give to students at home based upon the way that's structured, from everything I can see. And I'll let Lisa might want to weigh in a little bit, because she's been the test coordinator for the past several years. Number two, the Smarter Balance has a component called, they're basically modules, testing modules. What's the name, Lisa? I'm sorry.
Hey, Bob.
Sure, go ahead.
Can I just cut you off for 1 second? rather than discussing SBAC, it's not an option for us, right? I mean, it's a state instituted test. I guess my question is, to get to Dave's comment, because is STAR testing is far more commonly used for, isn't it like, I mean, we're doing it twice a year in the school, or is it 3 times, to monitor progress of the students? Is there any way that we could potentially implement a STAR test at the end of this academic year virtually? I mean, I don't know what's involved, but
There's no way.
STAR
Yeah.
testing.
I appreciate the question. I mean, this was batted around by lots of superintendents together. There's not one person in the room that said that they'd go down that road, because, you've got 859 kids. Who's helping them or not helping them with that assessment at home? Never mind just setting it up and a student doing that individually and having the right kind of guidance in terms of actually taking it as a first or second grader. There's an administrative aspect to that. But the swings in terms of the testing environment would be, I mean, there's no common read there at all. I mean, that's not Bob Gilbert speaking. That's a room of other superintendents and other curriculum directors who attend that meeting. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Lisa or my administrative team want to jump in there. It's a dilemma.
So is there any thought to potentially, I mean, is there a possibility then, let's say we decide we're going back in the fall, and we often do that, kindergarten week or something like that. Is there some way that we could potentially, the week before school starts, to do some sort of in-person testing before we go back?
I think that's dangerous. We have to plan for the fall, and we can't plan for the fall if we don't know where the kids are. How on earth are we supposed to plan for some sort of hybrid learning with no data?
Most curriculum is set. We're not actually changing the curriculum based on each kid. We're using it to guide it as a total, but we're not taking one kid's score and changing our math curriculum for next year. It's not how we generally do the education. So, I mean, I'll let Lisa but I'm saying, like,
I just want to say one thing quick.
If we didn't have that test, we don't make wholesale changes to curriculum every summer. We tweak things. We might work on things. We might work on a curriculum that we haven't worked on.
I just want to say one thing
I believe that the kids have moved from point A to point B during the year. And our question is whether they got 7 months into the year, however many months, and some of them didn't get further is a very real question and concern. And if we had data that said, you know what, over the last 3 months of the year, they made a third of the progress that we expected, then yeah, it would be very reasonable for us to say, okay, how are we going to catch them up at the start of the next year? Or if we looked and we said, you know what, some of the kids made 1 month's progress and some of the kids made 6 months progress, that's really interesting data that we should be thinking about as far as planning for the fall.
So, Steve, can I say one thing quick?
Yeah.
The next topic that we have is about summer programs at the school. And I think that this is an excellent dovetail to that topic because, I know that the recommendation is that we don't do a summer program, but maybe this is the summer program that we do, right? Maybe we do a summer program where we bring the kids back in a slow, controlled, safe manner to conduct the STAR test that, David obviously believes is important, and it gives us a trial run of bringing kids into the school, moving kids through the school safely. So I think that, these two topics are intertwined. And I just wanted to bring that point up quick.
I'm not advocating for STAR tests. I'm advocating that we need some data, and I think there are a lot of ways you can do it. So you can administer tests online with proctoring. You can have online proctoring where somebody is watching them like this through a WebEx where you can see all the kids and see what they're doing and who's in the house and what's happening. It's not perfect, but it might give us some data. That's a great version, Dan, of could we bring them in partially? Could we do, in the classroom, the teachers would be doing one-on-one. The teachers are already doing one-on-one meetings with the kids at some point. Are there some skills that they could be doing real-time one-on-one assessments over the next 3 weeks?
Yeah. I was wondering the same thing, whether that could happen online, that, you have a teacher administer an assessment one-on-one with students. I don't know how long does the STAR assessment, the test, take for a student to take? How long does it take the student?
Lisa or Doreen, will you help us with that?
It depends on the student. Some kids click right on through it and they're done in 6 minutes. some kids, there is a time limit within STAR, but some kids could take, 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the child. So it depends.
So is this one that they're taking like by themselves on an iPad type device and it's an interactive test? So I almost wonder if you could even have them logging in through a portal so they were actually doing it on a computer at the school. So there's no questions of any shenanigans in the background or them engaging with anything else. You could have somebody watching. I don't know.
Who's watching, I guess, is the question. I'm not sure who's watching, but I get the desire, and I mean, it's a frustrating area that's probably like no other to educational leaders and teachers as well. But I mean, I'm not sure what to say. I mean, one thing I can say is that, and I don't know where this will end up. They are contemplating allowing the smarter balance, the interim assessments. That was the word I was looking for. The interim assessments, which are some smaller assessments that are more. They can be formative as well as somewhat summative, but they're more formative in nature. That might be opened up in the fall for use, for districts to use, grades 3 through 6.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Sorry about STAR. We do have students with accommodations and modifications to take tests such as STAR, and trying to provide those for the students in a distance learning environment would be pretty much impossible. So that would be violating some IEPs, which, as you know, are legal documents, and 504 plans for students. So that's another sort of layer to this problem that if we start moving in this kind of a direction, we would have to work through. And I don't even begin to know how we would work through that. So it's just something to consider in this conversation.
Can I say a few words? So I think that I feel like there's a sort of this conversation is going in a different circle than where it's really aimed at. I think the point is that if we're doing education, we need to be doing some kind of assessment. And there has been some kinds of assessment in social distance learning in the learning system we have. And I think the important question is, what assessment is being done, and how will we use that assessment to judge what we're doing next year? So whether we talk about STAR, SBAC, some whatever teachers are doing, I don't think that we can believe that under the current scenario, any education is going on if there's no assessment. That's a really, really hard sell to believe. So there must be some assessment. And if there is assessment, what is it and how can we use it to judge what we're going to do next year? And I think the board, I would guess a number of members of the board are very interested in understanding what assessment is going to be used and how it can be used to judge what we're going to do next year. So I understand the many issues of the standardized testing. Any sort of standardization is very, very problematic, but we need to understand what kind of assessment is being done and how it's being used to educate the children. And there can't be an answer that there is no assessment.
I'm going to follow up on Jeffrey saying like that what we have to decide, and I think that, the board has spoken and saying like, we are saying that we want an assessment done. So once you decide that you're going to do something, then you figure out the way. Then you figure out the way over the I always mess up that thing. But you figure out once you commit to doing something, then that's how you find the solutions. So I think that we're saying that we want the Woodbridge School, Beecher Road School, to commit to doing an assessment and then figuring out how to do that. And we'll overcome the hurdles as they appear.
Let me just add something on that. Dan, I do agree that we want assessment, but actually I would phrase that differently. I don't think personally, and we could ask members of the board to chime in on this more if we need more of an understanding of what everyone is doing. It's not necessarily that it has to be an assessment, a test that tells us everything. I think most tests don't tell you everything anyway, right? I mean, tests are always problematic instruments. The question is, what assessment is being done? And how are we going to know what students need next year? And this is a very hard question. I completely agree with all of the troubles that people have mentioned about how hard it is to do this, but it's critical to providing education to have some idea of what the students' learning levels are. And we have to have some sense, even if it is, our assessment is going to be to ask the teachers, what did the students learn? Okay, well then tell us that, tell us how that's going to be used, etc. Now, I'm not very satisfied with that answer, but that is an answer as opposed to there is no assessment.
I think we're gonna have to step back as an administrative team and just kind of reflect on this. And I hear the different voices. We're all about assessment too. This is something we believe in strongly. I do think that probably the assessment that's probably gone on to some degree has probably been more qualitative in manner in terms of teachers seeing the student work and providing some commentary along the way. So I think, Jeff, in some ways that might answer a little bit about, like there's got to be some kind of assessment. Yeah. So the question was, if it's Bob Gilbert's kid who you're assessing as the teacher, did the kid do all that work on their own, or was there some level of, is it almost kind of like homework? Like was the parents involved in helping him come to that point or not? And then that also kind of leads into some of the survey questions, or even some of the thoughts about having how much interaction time there is between teacher and student, so that there's actually a genuine opportunity to watch it in action, watch the learning in action, or ask questions in action. But I think it's probably more qualitative.
Well, I agree that it's qualitative, but I want to caution against saying, oh, it's qualitative, therefore we can't use it, because then you're saying we have no assessment again. Mm-hmm. We have to believe whatever assessment tools we're using, we have to believe them and work on the premise that they're telling us the truth. Now, they may be very messy tools, they may be very qualitative tools, but we need to use that as our guide for what we're going to do in our educational process. So rather than bemoaning how terrible they are, which they are, I think we need to acknowledge what we're using as our assessment and put it forward and say, this is it. And this is what we're getting, and this is what we have to base it on. And I think the board would like to understand what that assessment is and have some summary of it in some form so that we can assess these issues, both about how much students have learned during this time, but also about how much heterogeneity there is among the students and what they've learned.
I also would emphasize, I don't think we have to reinvent everything in the world. If we're talking about basic skills, a teacher can be on a Zoom call or whatever platform they're using, and they can have the kid read off of a shared screen and see how well the kid is reading. They can have them solve math problems off of a shared screen and see how well they're solving math problems. The kids are doing some writing. They can have them do some writing. I think there are some low-lying fruit things that could easily be incorporated into the relationship that they already have going. That would allow for some data that at least gives us a sense of where kids are.
Okay. We'll step back for sure, and then you'll hear more about this as we move forward for sure. We'll need to talk about it as a team and see how that plays forward.
Okay. Summer programs.
Okay. So summer program, I have indicated for a few weeks now, based upon all the information I have, that I believe that with safety at the forefront and consultation with our nursing staff and our medical advisor and knowing the different variables that we have, I believe it's in the best interest that our summer programs be done virtually. So ESY and summer scholars will be done in a virtual manner, and that we would still offer E-Day and SEP, but not on site. These programs that they have, selected ones, would be transformed into remote programs. There's still no full guidance from the state in terms of summer programs. There has been for summer camp, but not for summer programs. Actually, driving home today before this meeting, I heard the governor talk about, and they still haven't provided definitive guidance for myself and our team. Even if there was definitive guidance given, we still would be feeling that this is not the right thing to be doing at this point in time. But today he even said, well, it's going to be mid to late July. At one point it was July 6th, but there hasn't been anything definitive. So I'm coming to the board just simply saying that there's a strong feeling, and it's not what we want to be doing, but it's what we feel like we need to be doing for all the different items that I've mentioned on this one-page summary. And we really need to keep our eyes on the big prize, which is getting kids back in the fall and having the right time to plan and having all the right pieces in place for that as well.
Comments? Dan.
Yeah, I have a comment. I read your summary and say again. Oh, I read your summary, Bob, and I understand it. And I have to say that I do not agree with it. And I'm going to ask the rest of the board to support me in not supporting you in this memorandum. I feel like we have an obligation as the Board of Ed to lead and not to follow. And we need to figure out these things and how we're going to bring these schools back in the fall. I agree with you wholeheartedly that we have to keep our eye on the prize, which is bringing the children back in the fall in some way. And the best way to do that is to commit to doing it today and commit to figuring out how to do that. Now, I don't want to put anybody in harm's way, but there is a safe way to work and do things. And, and we have to figure out, can you get children to sanitize in and sanitize out? Can you get them to wear masks? Can you not? How many children can you have safely in the building? Is it 250 children? Is it 300 children? I mean, we have 1,000, roughly 1,000 child population plus staff. What is the capacity of Beecher Road at social distanced? So I think that with the outdoor air environment, giving us extra space, providing us extra sunshine, providing additional fresh air available, that now is the time. And with the suppression of the virus at large in the state, now is the time to be bringing students and staff back and evaluating and having an automatic stop valve on it. If for some reason something doesn't go the way we think it should be and something emerges, by all means, we should stop and evaluate. And I'm not recommending conducting a trial with our children or with staff members or making anybody do what they don't want to do. But I think that to not try is to assure that we will fail. That's all.
Jeff, do you mind if I put you on the spot and ask for your outlook?
Okay, I'm on the spot. So I have basically a diametrically opposed view from what Dan just stated, in that at the moment we're in the midst of a pandemic that is striking our town very hard. Of 109 cases as of May 23rd, 29 individuals in Woodbridge community alone have died because of this disease. And that was updated as of 2 days ago. I don't understand how we could even contemplate at this point bringing students together in the schools when we know the consequence would be the death of our elderly population in Woodbridge. 29 people have died. Do we want to kill someone by bringing students together in the classroom? I just think that this is not a time we can even contemplate. We have to be very conscious of the fact that this epidemic is not going away. It has not been going away for a long time, and there's no indication it's going to go away now. We have no prediction of that. They're loosening of our governmental regulations currently, and one can argue back and forth about how necessary those are for our economy, and I'm not making an argument one way or another, but I'm just saying this is an ongoing battle that is being fought, and we are no way where we need to be. So I don't know how we can make any prediction as to when it would be safe to bring the kids together. It may be safe for them to some extent because they're kids, and although there are some major consequences for a few kids who get this disease, but we know exactly what it does to our elderly population. It's killed 29 of them in this town in the last 2 months. So we can't even contemplate, in my view, bringing students together. We know that transmission among students is very high if they're brought together. We know that social distancing is extremely difficult to perform for students. We know that all of the necessary things that we are even now struggling as adults to do, to socially distance, to wear a mask, et cetera, are very, very difficult for us to do in the context of our daily lives. So in the context of it being that hard for us, imagine how it is for the children. So I think that our choices are not easy to make, and what we have to do is very hard to predict. But I think at this point, making any kind of statement that we're going to bring kids together is vastly premature.
I agree completely with Jeff on many levels, including the inherent transmissibility. There's no way you get a bunch of kids in any space and they're not going to be sharing all sorts of contact. But also the idea as if something could go wrong and we change tack. That's not how it works. If something goes wrong, it's going to be at least a week before we know something went wrong, and we're not going to see the effects for 2 to 3 weeks afterwards, which is when people start dying. We've already spread the disease exponentially. So I agree wholeheartedly. We can't do this now. I appreciate Bob. I know it's a hard decision to make, but I personally think it's the right one.
I agree.
Yes, I also agree with Bob's referendum. And I think, Dan, I appreciate your thoughts on it. But I think all the things that do need to be worked out are things that the admin can be talking about and thinking about and putting their time into planning for the fall instead of kind of jumping in too soon now and making mistakes and then having to backtrack. So I think I totally agree with Bob's decision.
Yeah, I'll just
agree with Bob as well. I just don't think we're ready yet. Trust me, no one would benefit more than summer programs in my family situation. But we are, in my opinion, we are definitely not ready. And I'd rather see this summer be used to plan for a strong fall more than anything.
I also would agree with that. I think we have to be concerned about staffing as well, bringing staff in, and whether or not they're going to be willing to come in, and the staff that knows the kids should be the staff that works with the kids in the extended school year. And I think that's going to be another issue that we would have to consider. So, Jeff pointing out the difficulties of having the kids maintain social distance and masking. I think it's really at this point a nightmare, especially for many of our higher risk kids who would need that. So I support Bob's very difficult decision as well.
All right, Bob, do you need us to vote on this?
I think, I mean, to tell you the truth, I mean, if you want to vote as a board, that's up to you. But I mean, I feel like I'm bringing to you what, you know, it's part of my job to, you know, protect students and ensure the safety. And if, you know, if I hear consensus, but I'll let you as the chair kind of state that if you feel like you hear it as well. I don't think we need I don't think we need a motion, but if you want to do one, do it. Fine.
I think we should have a motion that says that we as a Board of Ed, in consultation with the superintendent, endorse his recommendation to cancel all on-site summer programs and replace them with virtual instruction and virtual programs.
Sounds good.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion? Any opposed?
I oppose.
Dan, any abstentions? Okay, then the motion carries. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, thank you, folks. Very difficult, and I understand it's just a difficult time. The next item, part of my report is it's a follow-up to what we discussed at the last board meeting, and so just to put from our finance committee, we also had a little discussion about this. So just putting it in writing that you know, in terms of the really thinking out of the box idea of, you know, shared legal services, does it get us any, does it move the needle on efficiencies and economies? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Thinking of it as a BOA district, everybody has different firms and arrangements. There are no in-house attorneys that we're aware of throughout the state anymore. There was one in Weston, but and that's a much larger district, and they actually reduced the position. It was all because of budget. They felt that they could not support something like that any longer, so that's no longer the case. And that was a large expense, and they still went outside. They still even used someone in addition to that in-house person for some of the specialty areas, as we discovered this past week. I'm just going to be honest. Both superintendents are pleased with their legal counsel. They work together for years, and it ends up providing continuity, important working relationships, and it helps. And eventually, sometimes it will result in cost savings. We do work together as a BOA district, whether it's in special ed or whether it's as the superintendents, to sometimes rotate whose legal service is going to be used if we're making a joint decision. So there is some economies that happen. But clearly, what we would be trying to do here, you would have to have at least 2 experienced educational attorneys for general and special education, and the cost would nearly be double what we're paying as the combined districts, the 4 districts right now. I do think it's important that we add this to our task force list of things explored and efforts, but it's not something that I see us. This would take a conversation of twisting people's thoughts about this from other BOA districts, other board members. When I say twist, meaning having them have a different way of thinking of it. You'd have to bring that up if we ever had another BOA joint combined meeting where we actually had a conversation about some items. So anyway, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Just trying to provide the information here. I don't think it's something we can do.
Bob, thank you very much for looking into it and putting together a memo. I had a couple of thoughts, and I think by way of background for everyone, I think it's helpful to remind everyone what the goal of the exercise was, which is to better manage the peaks, right? So we had a year this year where we spent about $100,000 in legal fees, way above what our budget was for legal fees. And we were lucky that we had a lot of unspent special education outplacement costs to cover our losses. So another way to look at it is that the magnitude of our loss this year amounts to a teacher, right? So it's a lot. So I think the question is not whether other districts want to explore a different model. That comes later, right? I think what we're asking are questions like, how much is each district spending for general education issues? How much is each district spending for special education issues? What are the big categories of issues that each district is reaching out to council for? And we would want to know historically, over the last few years. And by asking these kinds of specific questions, we're going to have a much richer dialogue, which then might generate some out-of-the-box thinking. And then at that point, maybe people might think, oh, okay, it might be interesting to explore this possibility. But there are different options. Like, you don't have to just have 2 in-house counsel, right? There could be a hybrid approach, as an example. Maybe you have 1 general ed attorney, right? Because you have 2/3 of the issues being general ed, roughly, and 1/3 special ed. And then you have a retainer with an outside attorney for special ed issues. And then, there are variations on that theme. Now, there are also ways, I think you were saying, look, if we just pay a flat fee, we might not get the best help, right? We might get paralegals or junior attorneys to work on our issues rather than the senior attorney. But we can do things like having flat fees that are paid according to a schedule, so that you withhold payment until services are rendered in the way that you are satisfied, so that you keep everyone properly motivated and intellectually honest about what's happening. So I think that it's still worthwhile looking into it. I understand that everyone's comfortable with the attorneys that they have, and that's a good thing. But sometimes it's good to have a fresh set of eyes also looking at issues because they might see things that someone who's been around for a very long time might not be able to see. So, I saw the bottom line of your memo, which is maybe we should take this up when we have our conversation with Bethany or, shared services discussions. And we did talk about having that meeting with Bethany at the last finance committee meeting. So hopefully, we'll be able to start with Bethany, have these detailed questions, dialogue, where we would talk about everything from legal fees to special education to technology, finance, et cetera, so that we can see where there might be some areas that make sense in sharing. So I don't know if anyone wants to react to that.
My streaming is a little slow. I don't know if I'm delayed or if no one's asking a question.
I guess what I would like to see, if people are supportive, is that we continue the conversation. But I agree with Bob. Maybe the next step would be having that meeting with Bethany where we do talk about legal fees, but legal fees among other topics as well. There are a whole bunch of things that are on the table for discussion there. So that might be the reasonable next step.
Okay.
So Steve, what was the outcome? I know that you said you were going to reach out and talk to the board chair of Bethany and schedule a meeting with yourself and one other party and one other party from them.
Well, we were going to do it and then COVID came, and then honestly, I haven't gotten back in touch with him again. So I will do that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question about surveys? I know we moved away, but I assumed that the surveys were all confidential, that someone's survey responses wouldn't be able to be traced back in any way. Is that correct?
That should be correct. James, you still listening? Can you just verify for me on that?
Yes, that is correct. No survey responses would be able to be grabbed.
Okay, thanks for confirming.
Okay, Bob, leadership contingency.
Correct. At the last meeting, when I presented this, and it was presented in the context that Commissioner wanted every superintendent to make sure they had someone who could take over immediately, given the current health crisis. I presented this, and so what I've done is I've updated this a little bit from the perspective of making sure that it's maybe clear enough. And also, one of the things that I'm responding to from the last meeting was people were, I believe, asking for, so what would be some other ideas or other models for this? And so I do want to say that, the model that, first of all, I want to make sure that we're entirely clear that this is not succession planning. This is handling short-term leadership needs. If someone is out for a couple of days and someone needs to take over for them because someone's sick, or it may extend a little longer, this is not a succession plan. It is really to handle short-term kinds of absences where you're trying to continue to have continuity and keep the organization running at the pace where you want to. If there were extended situations of extended duration, there would be a recommendation. And what would that look like? That would probably be more like, more than 2 months or something like that. I mean, but it's all relative, and the board at any time, if someone was out like myself, or someone else could say, look, we want to look at this a little closer at that moment. But bottom line is, what I've done is I've kept true to what has been in the past here in Woodbridge as the way we handle absences, the model before my time, the model during my time, the model that's used in our neighboring districts. And I've talked to multiple superintendents that I know of. Just, what do you do in this situation? using the internal team members who can take over without any kind of orientation time and like that is the way to go. But I have provided a few other ideas here that I don't see them as being they're not as doable. Just going right to your BOA sister districts and asking for administrators from those places. Well, those people have full jobs to do as well. And the understanding and practice in BOA is that coverage is first provided by internal administration if there's a need to cover. A second one would be a use of retired school administrators. So first of all, you have to fill these positions, and then the people who are here in the building already as an administrative team would have to provide significant orientation time for a short-term duration to help that person take over in the position. And then thirdly, you could use your professional organizations like CABE and CAPS to get assistance from them, but more than likely they would be looking towards the retired administrators as well to fill in any kind of a void. So I don't know if I've met the needs for the board in this, but this is where we are, and this is an accepted practical practice that is done in any place I've ever been, and including the places that I've checked in with recently. So I don't know if there's any questions on this, but I'm glad to take them.
Bob, I think we had a good test run this past November. I think it worked out pretty flawless with in-house succession. So I think we got a pretty good look at it with your absenteeism. So I think we move forward as is.
I would agree with that. Thank you.
I envisioned a process that looked a little different. I thought that we would have a group of 3 to 5 individuals for each of the positions, and then a set of questions that we would consider when making a selection, because it depends on context. So in no particular order, here are a few examples. Like we would ask, what is the duration? What impact would there be in the department that a replacement leaves? Is this a shortage area? What backup plan would need to kick in for the replacement's job? What financial implications are there? Does the person have directly relevant experience? Has the person assumed the role in the past or is in a similar role now? What parts of the job would the person be able to do or not do? What skills or experience would the person have to gain to carry out the job responsibilities? Does the arrangement help us move toward a regional model with shared services? How would the teachers and staff react to the arrangement? How does the candidate rack up against the other candidates, the pros and cons? And then we also talked about having a manual for each position. So basically there would be written instructions and the time spent for each area of focus.
Lynn.
Thank you, Steve. Joyce, I don't know. I'm looking at this, I think, from a different perspective than you are. I'm looking at it as like the substitute who fills in when the teacher isn't there. Not somebody that we're looking for to fill the position for the long term. And your questions sound to me like we're looking for somebody to fill the position for the long term. I'm looking at this as somebody who's filling in when an administrator can't do the job for the short term. So it would be like having a substitute in a classroom. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but that's how I read this, and I thought it was a good contingency plan for that purpose.
Well, that's one of the questions. What is the duration? Is it 2 days or is it 2 months? And the answer then should drive how we think about the different candidates and what candidate would make the most sense given the situation.
And so there's no two situations are going to be the same. I'll just simply say that, I mean, it could be for a couple of days. It could be someone going on a 4-day conference, which doesn't happen very often, by the way. When I was out this past fall, I knew for sure that it was going to be several weeks of full-time not being here, but the goal was always to try to start to come back and be, transition back within several weeks, which was the case, fortunately. So I don't think there's any there's no specific box around this, but I think it's situational, and it is more from the perspective of, I mean, it's a day-to-day operation kind of thing, and it's no, and listen, no, I'm not trying to, I'm just trying to say it's really a superintendent's discretion to make sure that they've got the right coverage in the right places for short-term things like this. And that's what we try to do. That's what's always been done. And that's what we'll try to do to continue. If COVID-19 hits somebody, and if it's a longer period of time and a more serious thing, God forbid, it would be a different way of approaching this with, interviewing possible candidates to come in and do something different.
Bob, are you looking for a motion?
I don't know, do we
this?
need an official motion to accept this, Bob, or?
No, I mean, there's this originated in just simply an FYI. I was doing what the commissioner had asked me to do, to just let you know how we play this out when we have, thinking about COVID-19 being a more severe situation than just your normal day-to-day, when people get sick or whatever. So I don't see a need for a motion. It was informational. It was the intent of it.
I think we might have lost Steve. He's having.
Back
He's
a
back.
little bit.
He's back.
Okay.
Do we have a contingency plan if we lose Steve?
Lynn.
All right. Does that mean Miss Sherman is up?
Mrs. Sherman, Mrs. Merrill, and Mrs. Mammon will just give a BRS update. Yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. Nice to see your faces on my screen. I hope that you are all doing well. I am just going to give you a few updates, and then I'm going to ask my friends, Miss Merrill and Miss Mammon, to jump in and share some pieces of information as well. So first of all, distance learning, obviously we are continuing it. And I have to say that our teachers are finding new and creative ways to engage our students. And they're really focusing a lot, not only on the academic side of things, but also really focusing on students and making connections with children in new and different ways. So for some examples, I actually participated, and Miss Merrill did too, in some small interest-based work with some of our primary students, and one of our primary teachers actually integrated some some arts week work with it. And I also got to bring Lizzie the leopard gecko, who lives in my office, to another one of them. So they're finding some new ways to do that. They're also hosting some birthday celebrations for kids, kids that are moving out of district. They're hosting some nice ways to say goodbye to them. Our fifth graders are doing weekly videos with different themes and turning those into a video montage and really encouraging other members of the community to be a part of that. And our sixth graders, for example, are hosting some trivia sessions with kids. And I actually played one of those trivia sessions once, and thank goodness I kept up with most of the children. I was a little bit nervous for a little while there. And our TAs are continuing to work very, very closely with their students. They're participating in small group sessions as well. They're meeting with students one-to-one. Many of them are going to the middle school and the high school to participate in the food service program. So they're continuing to really play an active role in this distance learning. Arts Week 13 just wrapped up. Many thanks to Miss Burford, Miss Atchison, and Miss Wagner, as well as the committee of parents and teachers that helped put this on virtually. There is artwork posted on the website. If you have not checked it out, you should, because it is really amazing. There's photographs, there's drawings, there's an airplane made out of paper towels. It's very, very cool. So you should check that out. And Ms. Burford actually worked really hard to make wind chimes that represents every single grade level that are now hanging around the Beecher Road School community. And she made the wind chimes unique to each grade level. So for example, the kindergarten has six small cans for 6 classes. The third grade one has 99 yogurt pots for the 99 students. And the fourth grade one has 5 steel pipes for 5 different classes. And they're all sort of unique and different in their own way. Bob mentioned earlier that we are finalizing our plans to pack up all of our student belongings. Many thanks to our teachers and our teacher assistants again for supporting this process, because the task of packing up over 850 students worth of belongings felt very overwhelming. Our secretaries have been a tremendous support in this as well as our custodial staff. It's really been a very big team effort to make this happen. We are going to do some contactless pickup, and parents are going to get notified about the schedule, because there will be specific schedules and time slots for parents. They will be notified of that tomorrow, as well as in my principal's message going out on Friday. And we're also going to have a day where if you can't come on your scheduled day, then we're going to have another day where you can just show up and grab it at your convenience. Graduation plans are also underway to celebrate our sixth graders. We are still working on finalizing all of those plans. We have a number of different ideas that we're kicking around, and we also reached out to our colleagues in Bethany to find out what they were doing for eighth grade, and trying to do something super special in conjunction with our amazing PTO for our sixth grade students. So the sixth grade team and the administration and the PTO, we are all sort of collaborating and working very closely with our technology department, because they are going to help us with this and find a nice way to celebrate our sixth graders. Summer curriculum work is something that we are also shifting our focus to. Teachers are submitting some proposals now for the work that they would like to do, and we're spending a lot of time asking them to think about adjustments to curriculum documents and pacing due to the impact of distance learning, and also thinking about planning for reentry in the fall and the impact on curriculum. So some of the questions that I know we were discussing tonight are things that we are going to be talking about with our colleagues and our teachers and our staff over the summer. And we're going to really roll up our sleeves and kind of dig into that work. And we're starting by having some conversations about the work that has been done and the impact that might have on future students. So we're going to dive into that even more during some of our summer curriculum time. That's it for me. If there's no questions, I will turn it over to my friend, Miss Merrill, who has some additional information to share with you.
Lisa, thank you so much for all the work you and all the teachers do. It's, I know it's tremendous, and we're all very, very grateful. Thinking ahead to the fall, I was wondering how you guys are thinking about the fall. It seems very tricky because we don't know whether we're going to be able to come back. So do we have different scenarios that we're planning for, like in-person, distance learning, maybe a hybrid, a rotational kind of an approach? I was just curious how you guys are thinking and planning for the fall.
So I would say that, and my administrative colleagues can jump in as well, but I would say that we're beginning those conversations now. We are on the early side of that with no definitive plans in place yet. We are continuing to communicate very regularly with our school nurse, Stacey Katz, who is also in communication with state health officials. So she's been a tremendous help. And we are kicking around a lot of different ideas and thoughts about what it might look like. I would say that we haven't landed anywhere yet, but we are definitely thinking about a lot of different scenarios and trying to think through what that might look like. This summer is when we're going to spend a lot of our time really, really unpacking that and thinking through some more of the specifics and getting into the weeds of all of those different scenarios, and hopefully getting some more guidance from the state as to what it might look like in the fall.
I guess one observation is that we were lucky, if that's the word to use, in the sense that COVID shut down the school in March, but that was enough time for teachers and students to build relationships and get to know each other, which is much harder to do virtually. So in the fall, if we are still in a distance learning environment, it might be harder for teachers and students to get to know each other.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It's definitely something that we've talked about. And again, because we don't have specific guidance from the state yet, it's hard for us to know if that's what will be. Like, will we start the year with distance learning? Will we start the year in-person learning and switch over? It's hard to know right now at this moment what that might look like in the fall. But we agree with you, and that is one of the things that we have again, just begun to talk about, and what can that look like, and how can we build those relationships if we are in a distance learning situation. So it's definitely a conversation that we will continue to have over the summer months.
Thank you.
No more questions? If not, I'll turn it over to Ms. Merrill.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what Lisa had to say about our teaching assistants. They've come into school using social distance protocols to assist teachers in the packing up of student belongings. Several TAs have completed this part of our end of the year work, while others will be assisting grade level teachers throughout the rest of this week. TAs will also be assisting teachers in the process of packing up their classrooms as we close out the year and we get the building ready for summer cleaning. We just want to say thank you to all those TAs for coming in to assist with this really important end of the year work. I'm also going to piggyback on what Bob and Joy had to say earlier about our wave parade. It was last Friday. We teamed with the PTO, as Joy had said, in organizing the wave parade for Beecher students and families and for our teachers. We want to thank our teachers and TAs and secretaries, nurses, custodians, board member, administrators for all the Beecher community members for coming out to wave and drive through the school campus, especially Beth Heller and Senator Logan, the Woodbridge Fire and Police Departments, and everybody who participated, the 300 plus families who came through. The event was spectacular, to say the least, and we feel it provided some closure for those students and families who came through. Does anybody have any questions for me? If not, then I'll turn it over to Mrs. Mammon.
I just want to say that it was an incredible tribute, the Wave Parade, to the school community as a whole. The fire department, I spoke to members of the fire department and the police department. They were delighted to be able to come and honor the teachers and the staff and the kids as well. They were just as excited about the kids coming through and seeing the line of cars as they pulled out of Beecher Road School, the line of cars that were pulling in. And so I want to thank Doreen, you especially, for your working on coordinating that with the PTO and the rest of the administrative team for being there and just having logistically it all work out. It was an amazing morning. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
If there are no questions, I'll go ahead. Okay, so I just want to share some thoughts that I've had about the special education department. I was trying to just think of how I could describe what's been going on. One word came to mind was flexibility. The team has been so flexible, working with families, communicating, because our students have varied learning needs. And so they've had to adjust what they're doing, change it, modify, and they really have gone above and beyond meeting and working with family. Also, another word is creativity. They've thought outside the box. They've worked together as a team and really have come up with some creative, great ideas of how to meet the needs of the students. And the last thing is they had determination. They will reach out, do whatever they need to do to get the help for the students that they need. So I just want to thank them for all of their efforts. The teaching assistants have been working behind the scenes with some of the teachers. They might be recording books. They might be actually following up with students who are struggling, giving them some one-on-one time to help them out. Or they might be, as Doreen mentioned, they might be working behind the scenes, handing out lunches or packing up. So they've all been
working above and beyond and supporting teachers to allow them that time to be with students. The other interesting thing that has happened recently, Sarah Wozlacki, who is our BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, has helped to coordinate a professional development for our teaching assistants. And the focus one was on trauma, because students right now may be very much impacted by this whole situation. It could be a trauma. So having some trauma-informed practices, and that was one piece of it. Then she also was able to coordinate ABA 101, Applied Behavior Analysis 101. It focuses on working with our neediest students and how to approach what's called discrete trial instruction, as well as doing data collection. So it's a chance for our TAs that we normally would not have. So it's one benefit of distance learning, that they're able to have the time to work on this. And they actually will get a certificate once they finish this 8-hour course. So I really want to thank Sarah for her efforts and time and supporting. And it's not easy. It's a learning curve to even just to get logged in and to be able to do this. So thank you to her and the tech department for helping support everyone. But overall, everyone has been just outstanding and working as a team, and just want to say thank you. One last piece I want to mention is planning and placement team meetings have started, and basically we're trying to do them in the afternoon around 2 o'clock, so we're not interfering with instruction, because it's not like we have substitutes available that can go in for distance learning. And so we're trying to not interrupt our teaching and learning that's going on. And it's worked out quite well. It's been working out the kinks of doing it virtually with families. And the parents have been outstanding through this whole process and just communicating their needs and also just being flexible and working with us. So I just want to thank everyone for their support. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I don't see any hands up.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bob, Lisa, Cheryl, Doreen, thanks for everything you guys are doing. Really, really appreciate all the efforts that you're putting in on behalf of kids in the town. Bob, you want to mention upcoming meeting?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier in the announcements, next meeting on June 15th, we'll have a little virtual ceremony at 6:30, from 6:30 to 7 o'clock, to recognize our 6th grade students. So please make sure to participate in that as you come on the screen for that. The wellness report, while we had listed this and it was part of original plan, we're hoping to provide that at a point a little later, either in July or August, so we can focus not just on some of the things we did this past year, but also focus a little more on the reopening from a wellness standpoint as well. So you folks can be flexible with the wellness report coming a little bit later. I do, though, instead of that, I would expect to come to you with sort of an update on our reopen committee and any work that's continued to go on as we get ready for the fall and as we start that process. And if we're able to provide any more information on assessment at that time, we will do that as well within the context or separately from that.
Okay.
Bob, can I ask you about the CAPS award? Can you describe it a little bit and what the requirements are and some of the background on that?
Sure. So each teacher, it's an award that is sponsored by the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. It's made available. It's had a long history of being part of what we do for our 6th grade students as they leave. It really recognizes students who have an attitude of service to the school, have had a level of success, but it's not necessarily of just academic prowess. It can also be a success in overcoming obstacles. It's an award that each homeroom teacher selects one person out of their homeroom for it. I don't actually have the list of all the aspects of that, but certainly a community spirit to them, to the student as well. I don't know, Lisa, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, but it's that kind of a sense. And each of the students, each of the teachers writes something in testimony to that child, and we read it during that 6:30 time at the meeting. We can get you more information. Go ahead.
And do we publicize the winners? I
Yes.
just recall, oh, we do. Okay,
Yes.
because I had overheard some of the families talking about how they didn't think that it was publicized, and so they were just wondering why. But if we do,
I mean, it was always in the Woodbridge Bulletin. There's always a picture of the CAPS winners, and I think we do it all the time. I don't know, Bob, is that changed?
I have to go back and look. I mean, but but it just raises the reminder that it's important to celebrate our successes and to make sure that we do that, which we try to do.
I found the descriptor of it. If you want me, I can read it.
Sure.
What?
It just says that the award is designed to recognize students who contribute to school, peers, and/or community, achieve relative to their ability and/or display leadership and/or qualities of citizenship. The award is not based on academic achievement.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Finance Committee, Joyce. You muted yourself, Joyce.
Thank you. We are projecting a surplus of about 110,000, which is nearly double the surplus about a month ago. And the additional surplus is due to a net savings related to COVID-19, resulting from things like transportation credit and SRO credit and unspent dollars for professional development and supplies. At the town finance meeting last Monday, as Bob mentioned, the town's overall budget went down about 1%, and Beecher was unsurprisingly allocated a 0% increase. At our Beecher Finance Committee meeting, I shared some takeaways from Matt Gigliotti's speech that I think would be worth repeating for the benefit of the whole board as well as the larger Beecher community. Just so that we're all on the same page. And so the takeaways for me were, number one, there's a lot of economic pain in Woodbridge. Number two, teamwork is highly valued. Number three, the town has historically been generous to Beecher. And number four, there were a lot of comparisons between Amity and Beecher. And I'll unpackage each of those takeaways. So on the economic pain in Woodbridge, Matt had quoted the New Haven Register, which put Woodbridge in the top 25 municipalities with respect to jobless claims over the last few weeks. So the town has about $200,000 in uncollected property taxes. So that's significant for us. Number two, teamwork. The words team and teamwork were recurring. They just kept popping up countless number of times. And there was a lot of mention about departments chipping in, praise for everyone who were great team members, et cetera. So teamwork, again, is highly, highly valued. The town has historically been generous. So it was mentioned that the town allocates the largest percentage increase to Beecher every year. And they have always come to our aid when we've had unexpected special education expenses. So, one thing I think should be noted that this relationship that we have with the town is not typical between towns and boards of education. So we're fortunate in that regard. So when we have a deficit, they do come to our aid. In terms of the comparisons between Beecher and Amity, what was said was, we get more than Amity. Amity returns more money to the town than we do. Amity's reductions have resulted in more painful cuts, and it goes on in that vein. So, we could sit here and we could disagree with some of the points that were made, but as I said at the Finance Committee meeting, it's actually irrelevant whether we agree or disagree, because these are the perceptions, and the perceptions are the reality that we have to deal with. So we have our work cut out for us in trying to manage those perceptions going forward. While we know what the town is allocating to us, there is the big question about whether we need to return the surplus And if we get to keep the surplus, how much of it will we get to keep? And so we're going to need to wait for another few weeks to see what our town's tax collection situation is and where our surplus is actually going to end up, because it's, moving right now, and we'll have a better idea once all of our encumbrances have been released. So once we have clarity from the town about our surplus, we're then going to be able to finalize our budget. So we're a little bit late, but there are a lot of uncertainties at this point. That's it for me.
Okay. Questions for Joyce? Awesome. Policy Committee.
As Bob mentioned earlier, we have put policy meetings on hold for now. That's, we are open to it if there are policies that come up that are urgent and vital that we need to address, for sure, but we are trying to be mindful of selectmen members' requests to not have meetings unless if they are urgent and vital. But we do have policies on the table right now. I don't know. Do I put the motion forward?
Sure. Put the motion forward and then we'll.
That we can discuss. So I move that we adopt policies 5,000, concepts and roles in student policies, 5145.71, surrogate parent program, 5148, electronic information technology media, 6114.1, fire emergency drills and crisis response drills, and 6141.321, internet acceptable use as revised.
Is there a second?
Jeffrey.
Second?
Second.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Discussion.
I'd like to discuss policy 5,000.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, could you tell me who the second was, please?
Jeffrey Townsend.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Policy 5,000 has been under review for the last 30 days. Since the data was submitted on February 24th, I did confirm that a suit was filed with the United States District Court in Connecticut. The case is Soule versus Connecticut Association of Schools. The outcome of this case will change the very language that we put forward in policy 5,000. The policies of Beecher Road are the policies of an entire school district, not just that of an elementary school. Our focus is often on the effect that policies will have on elementary school children. However, if we regionalize, these policies could affect our fellow Amity schools, including the high school. At the school board level, are the first and last representatives of the townspeople for the school district. If Hartford chooses to force down laws and policies that are detrimental to our town, we have an obligation to stand firm against them, to avoid these problems due to the whims of Hartford, or to lobbying efforts of specific groups in Hartford. The language changes put forth by CABE do not clarify our policy as it was written in 2014. Ultimately, the new language could be used to require students and teachers to use inaccurate pronouns in violation of their First Amendment rights. This is happening in Virginia at this very moment, where a teacher was fired for declining to refer to a female student using a male pronoun. It is a student privacy and safety concern in locker rooms, changing areas, and overnight trips. The restrooms could be violated in this proposed policy. Under it, a male student who identifies as a female could be allowed to use the room with female students for an overnight trip, or be given access to a female changing area, or vice versa. I refer now to the Boyertown School District in Pennsylvania, where a female student was changing clothes with male students in a men's locker room. Embarrassed and confused, the male student sought help from the school officials. He was told that he should just tolerate it and make it as natural as possible. As I said before, technically we are a school district and not just an elementary school. Our policies should be written as such. This school, our individual school rules can handle the subtle fact that we are an elementary school. One other example of how this language is being abused by people in the world is withholding information from parents about a student's desire to identify as the opposite sex. Some schools have used similar policies to justify refusing to inform parents if a child requests to go by a different name, different pronouns, or use privacy facilities of the opposite sex. There's no clarification or protections in Policy 5000 to prevent this, and it should be pushed back down to the committee level and rewritten until the above issues have been addressed. I understand that asking the board to vote down this policy may be hard, hopefully less hard with some of these examples I've highlighted. It is on its face and feels nice and good to validate what people think, especially what a child thinks to be true. But the truth is subjective, but the truth of subjective gender identity is not biological sex, and our policy should be based on objective facts. The New York Post just recently reported that women are faring far better than men in COVID cases. As an example, if a man is having abdominal pain and a woman is having abdominal pain, the course of diagnosis is far different. I'm sure any OB/GYN will tell you this. If a patient was to enter the hospital saying they were from the future or from the past, we would not validate these false realities. We would love these people enough to help them return to the objective world with the rest of us. We should love our children that much as well. We should stand up for them, to not let a small group of people bully us and to make us say that 2 + 2 = 5. And most importantly, not to let an often temporary belief of a child cause sterilization, lifelong pain, just to make ourselves feel better today and agreeing with the notion. Therefore, I move that you vote not to approve Policy 5000 as submitted. I ask that you push the policy back down to the committee to rewrite it and to remove the words gender identity from it. Thank you.
Are there other comments?
I don't know if others had thoughts. I mean, one thing, I don't know if folks have had a chance to read Policy 5000. It's essentially trying to avoid discrimination against any students. And it's speaking to our legally protected classes. So this is from legalese documentation. So regardless of whether we put it in our policy or not, we are required to do this by law. And I mean, morally, I think we are obligated to protect all children. And it does say in it, the second paragraph, each child shall be given equal opportunity. But since children vary widely in capacities, interests, social, and economic background, no two can be treated exactly alike if the fullest development of each is to be achieved. Which is true across so many things. And it's listed here, you know, sex is listed, marital status, which maybe doesn't apply to our children as much necessarily, but age, religion. These are protected classes. So we may have a disagreement on that in terms of who we think is right to protect, but I don't know. I support it as is.
If I could just, it's been a while. Can I just remind the board of a few things? And I do understand and respect all the different viewpoints that are around this. So please understand that. We, a couple of things. One is that we had an opinion written by our board attorney that was shared several meetings ago, indicating that the language here is completely appropriate, and it's everything that Megan just described and more in terms of supporting that. Second of all, we have a number of policies that the Board of Education has already adopted in past couple of years that already have this language in there. So you've already adopted this language and approved this in some of your policies that you have in the policy manual. Third, I would just say that, you know, there are lawsuits about all kinds of things that are out there in the greater world, and there are advocates on both sides of this. And you know, I do understand that it is there are different philosophies and different opinions, but I just wanted to bring those 3 points to the board's attention.
Dan, you're mentioning objective data, so I think we should actually focus on the objective data. So children who identify as LGBTQ, 87% of them report harassment or discrimination in schools. Those who report harassment and discrimination have worse school outcomes, including truancy, lower GPAs, and a range of other negative school outcomes. They also have a wide range of negative mental health outcomes, so increased depression, increased substance use, and they're 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. As a school board, we have an obligation to protect our students. So this is something that leads, literally the text says, that we should not discriminate against children based on their sexual orientation and gender identity, and you're advocating that we should take that out, that it's okay to discriminate on them. It's
I'm not
utterly
saying
preposterous when we're talking, that is exactly what you're arguing for.
No,
So
I argue that
so we don't,
children
let's not
in
argue with
Talking about
each
is
other.
something that leads to a 4 times increased rate of suicide attempts. Now, if you read any of the institutes that look at this, the Institute of Medicine or the White House convenes a meeting on bullying and has published through their government channels that the top recommendations to deal with this are actually to put into place exactly this kind of policy to prevent discrimination in schools.
I think you are conflating the cause with the effect. And it's our failure to support these children and help them through their gender dysphoria that is causing those outcomes.
No, Dan, I'm not. That's not at all what I'm saying here.
We shouldn't
No,
be.
no,
We
I
shouldn't be
understand that's not what
arguing
you're
with
saying.
each other. We make comments about the policy. So, Dan, I just don't want people arguing. David has some comments if you want to finish your comments, and then Dan, if you have any further comments, but they should be directed at the policy, not at each other.
So if you look at the government's policies themselves, the explicit recommendations are, and I'll pull it up so that we can give it to you exactly, but that implementing rigorous anti-discrimination policies at the level of elementary schools is the top intervention to prevent those types of bad outcomes for kids with mental health and for suicidality. So I would say not only should we be doing this, but we should be looking at a range of other interventions that are also recommended by the government to help prevent these negative outcomes.
All right. Thank you, David. Any other comments on this policy?
I just have a very brief comment, which is just that I think I just want to echo the sentiment that the concern seems to me largely about how the language can be abused, and I just want to echo the sentiment that any language can be abused in lots of different ways to make a lawsuit. But the language here is simply about not discriminating against individuals on several bases, including gender identity. And I think we should all be able to agree that discrimination on the basis of gender identity or any other characteristic of individuals is not a thing we want in our schools.
Are there any other comments? So if I can, I'm going to just request that we divide this question because I haven't heard any comments about any other policy things. So I don't want any votes to be construed as, so I'm going to say
one final comment.
What's that?
Can I just make one final comment on this, or?
Yeah, I'm just dividing out policy 5,000. So we're discussing that. We'll vote on that one and then we'll vote on the rest unless there's other comments. Go ahead, Dan.
So the final comment that I'd like to make is about the language used in our policies and the abuse that could come from them. I am by no means advocating discrimination against anybody. You know, I believe that we should love all individuals and love them enough to help them. That is the only thing that I'm advocating for. I am by no means advocating discrimination against anybody in any way. Language in our policies is important because it represents a legal, it can be used legally. Our actions are completely independent of that legal language in a policy.
I know.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
I have no issue with the language as it is. I hear Dan's argument, but I think it's mostly a slippery slope argument that if we were to adopt this language, then it could potentially lead to some of the problems or concerns, I should say, that Dan had. I mean, it's possible. I think it's unlikely. And I think if we encounter issues that we disagree on as a board down the line, then we address those issues as they arise. But I see no reason to not adopt language concerning discrimination of various groups because of some concern of this potentially being a slippery slope.
Okay. Let's have a vote on policy 5,000. All those in favor of adopting 5,000 as written, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Can I just ask a question to Dan, just so that I understand? Because it sounds like
We're in the middle.
all of us, including.
We're voting. Can we just vote first? We started the voting process.
Okay, but I need to ask him so that I understand where he's coming from. Like, what does he want to? How does he want to rewrite the
So
discrimination?
I don't mean to cut you off, but
policy?
there's 9 people, and so far I've heard 8 people are going to vote for this and 1 against. And it is 9:25. We have more things on our agenda. I mean, if it's going to change your vote to go no, I'm happy to do it, but I haven't heard any consensus that this is not going to pass. And Dan's had 3 opportunities to speak on this.
I just wanted to be fair to Dan. That's all.
Dan, do you think we're not being fair to you?
No, I appreciate the opportunity that I've been given to speak. The only thing I would say to answer her question very simply is that just remove the 2 words gender identity. That's all so if that changes your mind, that's all I was asking.
So any opposed to the resolution as written?
I'm opposed as written.
Okay, Dan, are there any abstentions? Okay, it passes. We're going to move on to policy, the remaining 4 policies. Does anyone have any comments or discussion about any of those?
No.
Okay, seeing none, then we'll take them as a group. Any opposition to accepting these 4 policies? All right, everyone else in favor? Any abstentions? All right, Marcia, that's unanimous. Thank you. Megan, CABE liaison report.
Sure. So quickly, 2 things. At the April meeting, CABE Board of Directors voted unanimously to freeze dues for the 5th year in a row, believing that the next year will be difficult for members as they reopen schools after the shutdown. Thought that's not sure how much that actual is going to save us, but something's better than nothing. So virtual meetings is one thing that, so they're going to continue to host virtual meetings for board members to discuss topics such as graduation, technology, special ed, budgets, and any other hot topic that arise. But they did, so keep an eye on emails, everyone. I think everyone's getting them, and if for some reason you're not, let me know or let Marcia know. But they are saying if you have topics that you feel like would be really important to learn more about or to have conversations about, to give Lisa Steimer an email. And she would love to hear your thoughts on that. That's it.
Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Any new business? We will have we have a non-meeting when this is all over, so.
Can I just say something about that? When you're done, I'll just say a couple instructions. You want to?
Oh, can I ask a question? I was wondering whether anyone would be interested in exploring whether we could continue with the WebEx meetings even after we're allowed to convene again. It just is such a convenient way to, to participate. And if you look at the number of people that actually dial in, it's way more than the number of people we've ever had attended in person. So clearly people are engaged and this platform seems to work. So I was wondering.
I don't have a problem with us continuing WebEx. I think that the board, we should be meeting in person because I do, honestly, it's very hard. I didn't know Dave Ross was trying to ask a question earlier. I can't, I can't get everyone on my screen at once. And I do find it a little bit more difficult to have a conversation when someone starts speaking, it cuts someone else off a little bit. It's just hard to, I have a hard time as chair kind of feeling like I'm able to appropriately recognize everyone. And I literally don't see people sometimes. And so I'm happy to have the WebEx going. I would like, when we can, I think we should be meeting in person. We can run it live as a WebEx.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yes, I was going to suggest that maybe we have, I'm not a techie, but some way that faculty members who can't access it on government access TV would be able to access the board meeting from home. Faculty and staff, it's nice to see the amount of people who are here as participants. And so if that's a possibility in the future, maybe that's something that we could look into as, set as a board goal of increasing our visibility to employees of the district who can't access government access TV and see it live.
Okay. All right, Bob, did you want to make a comment? So I guess before we do that, well, Bob, go ahead and make your comment about the non-meeting.
All I was going to say was that for just board members, we're having a non-meeting, which is a private meeting. And so when this meeting is over and when we adjourn, you still have public comment to go, I believe.
Yep.
But after that, make sure you all shut off and you completely log out of WebEx. I'll be sending you an invite for Google Meet. I've already sent you one email just to kind of remind you about your email address, your Woodbridge PS email address and a password, but I'll be inviting you to a meeting, hopefully a short meeting, a non-meeting that is. All set.
Okay. Then final public comment.
James, you still on? Help us. Are there any hands?
I don't see any hands as of right now.
Okay. Then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any opposition?
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Megan.
Thank you.
All right, so we're hanging up, Bob, and then you're sending us a new link